Arthur Pendleton had built his entire existence on the bedrock of trust, a foundation he believed was as unyielding and solid as the ancient granite peaks that cradled his home in Willow Creek, Colorado. A man of 68, a retired civil engineer whose career had been defined by precision and unwavering integrity, Arthur had poured his meticulous nature and considerable life savings into transforming a once dilapidated mountain lodge into a thriving, picturesque bed and breakfast. It was more than a business. It was a sanctuary, a testament to his enduring love for his wife, Eleanor. Eleanor, a woman of 59, possessed a quiet grace and an almost spiritual connection to her sprawling gardens, which flourished in vibrant defiance of the harsh mountain climate. She had been Arthur's unwavering partner through every challenge, every triumph. Their life together, though not without its trials, had been a tapestry woven with shared dreams and mutual respect. Now, however, the insidious tendrils of early-onset Alzheimer's were beginning to cast a long, chilling shadow over their golden years, slowly eroding the vibrant woman Arthur cherished. IT was against this backdrop of encroaching fragility that their only son, David, and his wife, Sarah, had returned to Willow Creek. Their arrival, just 6 months prior, had been presented as a selfless act, a homecoming motivated by filial duty. They would, they claimed, help Arthur and Eleanor manage the lodge, easing the burden as Eleanor's condition progressed. "It's the least we can do, Dad," David had declared, his voice resonating with an earnestness that had always been his most disarming trait. His arm had been draped casually, possessively, around Sarah's slender waist. "You've given us so much. It's time we gave back." Arthur, ever the pragmatist, yet deeply sentimental beneath his stoic exterior, had been profoundly touched. He had always prided himself on his keen ability to discern character, a skill honed over decades of negotiating complex contracts and managing diverse teams. David, his only child, had always seemed to embody the very best of him: hard-working, intelligent, and fiercely loyal. Sarah, with her bright, almost incandescent smile and seemingly boundless energy, had quickly charmed Eleanor. In her moments of confusion, Eleanor often mistook Sarah for a younger version of herself, a memory that brought a bittersweet pang to Arthur's heart, a fleeting glimpse of the past that was slipping away. For the first few months, David and Sarah's presence was an undeniable balm. David, with his MBA and a sharp mind for numbers, took charge of the lodge's bookings, marketing, and finances, tasks Arthur found increasingly taxing as Eleanor's needs demanded more and more of his dwindling reserves of energy and attention. Sarah, with her background as a certified nursing assistant, seemed perfectly suited to take charge of Eleanor's daily care. She ensured her complex medication schedule was meticulously followed and engaged her in gentle, stimulating activities, reading aloud from Eleanor's favorite poetry, listening to classical music, or simply sitting in the garden, pointing out the newly bloomed roses. These efforts brought fleeting moments of clarity and joy to Eleanor, and immense relief to Arthur. Freed from some of the relentless burden, Arthur found himself able to focus on the lodge's necessary maintenance and, occasionally, to indulge in a cherished pastime he hadn't enjoyed for years: fly fishing in the pristine mountain streams that snaked through the valley. The first tremor of unease, subtle yet persistent, struck Arthur during a routine, almost subconscious check of the lodge's financial records. He'd always maintained a close, almost obsessive eye on the books, a habit ingrained from decades of managing multi-million-dollar engineering projects where a single misplaced decimal could spell disaster. David had assured him, with an easy confidence, that everything was in perfect order. Yet, a small, almost imperceptible discrepancy caught Arthur's eye. A series of withdrawals, not individually large enough to trigger immediate alarm bells, but frequent, almost rhythmic, and without any clear, corresponding explanation in the ledger. He dismissed it, at first, as an oversight, a minor accounting error. David was busy, after all, and the lodge, under his son's management, appeared to be thriving, its occupancy rates higher than ever. Then came the incident with Eleanor's medication. Arthur had always been scrupulous, almost ritualistic, about her daily regimen. A complex cocktail of pills designed to slow the relentless progression of her disease and manage its debilitating symptoms. One evening, he found Eleanor unusually agitated, her hands trembling violently, her eyes wide and clouded with a raw fear he hadn't seen in weeks. Sarah, who was supposed to have administered the evening dose, was nowhere to be found. David, appearing flustered, explained she was out running errands, a plausible enough excuse on its own. But the vivid image of Eleanor's profound distress, her whispered pleas for comfort, gnawed at Arthur, planting a seed of doubt in his heart. From that day forward, Arthur began to observe more closely. His engineer's mind, trained to spot anomalies, now focused with a laser-like intensity on his own home. He noticed that Sarah's attentiveness to Eleanor seemed to wane significantly whenever Arthur was preoccupied with lodge duties or had stepped out. Her phone, once a rare distraction, now seemed to be a constant companion, her attention frequently diverted to its glowing screen. David's explanation for the recurring financial discrepancies, when Arthur cautiously broached the subject again, became increasingly vague, peppered with technical jargon about reinvestments, market fluctuations, and operational adjustments that, to Arthur's experienced ear, simply didn't add up. The majestic granite peaks of Willow Creek, once a comforting symbol of steadfastness and permanence, now seemed to loom with a silent, watchful judgment, their shadows lengthening with Arthur's growing unease. One crisp autumn morning, the air sharp with the scent of pine and impending winter, Arthur made a decision. He would take matters into his own hands, employing the same methodical approach he once used to troubleshoot complex structural failures. He feigned a sudden, urgent business trip to Denver, packing an overnight bag with exaggerated gestures and making a show of saying a heartfelt goodbye to Eleanor, David, and Sarah. Instead of driving to the airport, however, he drove a few miles down the winding mountain road, parked his car in a secluded grove of aspens, and then, with a heavy heart and a growing sense of dread, hiked back to a hidden spot overlooking the lodge. It was a place he used to frequent in his youth, a quiet perch where he could clear his head and watch the sunrise paint the valley in hues of golden rose. Now, he watched, a knot of icy dread tightening in his stomach, praying his suspicions were unfounded. What he saw unfold over the next few hours was a slow-motion nightmare, each frame etching itself into his memory with agonizing clarity. Sarah, instead of engaging Eleanor in her usual morning activities, a gentle walk in the garden, a session of memory exercises, was engrossed in her phone, seemingly oblivious to Eleanor's quiet distress, her vacant stare. Later, Arthur watched as Sarah entered Eleanor's room, emerging a few minutes later with a small, amber-colored pill bottle. Then, with a furtive glance around, as if sensing unseen eyes, she walked to the kitchen sink and, with a casual flick of her wrist, emptied a handful of Eleanor's precious pills down the drain. The small, almost imperceptible tremor of unease that had plagued Arthur for weeks now became a seismic shock, a devastating earthquake that shattered the very foundations of his trust. That night, Arthur returned to the lodge, his face a mask of grim determination, his heart a cold, hard stone. He found Eleanor in her room, her eyes wide and unfocused, her tremors more pronounced than ever. He checked her medication dispenser, a sophisticated device he had personally programmed. It was nearly empty, far too quickly for the prescribed dosage. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. Sarah wasn't just neglecting Eleanor. She was actively harming her. He then retreated to his study, a room he had always considered his sanctuary, filled with engineering blueprints, leather-bound books, and the comforting scent of old paper. Now it became his war room. He began a meticulous, painstaking audit of the lodge's finances, cross-referencing every bank statement, every booking record, every expense report. The discrepancies he had noticed earlier were not errors. They were a pattern, a systematic, calculated siphoning of funds. Large sums, cleverly disguised as legitimate business expenses or phantom supplier payments, were being transferred to an offshore account, an account he traced back, through layers of obfuscation, to a shell corporation registered in David and Sarah's names. The paper trail was damning, irrefutable. The betrayal was a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left him breathless. His own son, his flesh and blood, his daughter-in-law, whom he had welcomed into his home and heart, preying on his wife's vulnerability, on his trust, on his life's work. The thought was almost unbearable, a corrosive acid eating away at his soul. He spent the rest of the night poring over documents, his heart aching with each new discovery, each piece of evidence a fresh wound. He found irrefutable proof of Sarah deliberately altering Eleanor's medical logs, fabricating entries to cover the reduced medication dosages, even inventing non-existent appointments to explain Eleanor's worsening condition. It was a calculated, cruel act, designed not just to neglect, but to actively hasten Eleanor's decline, to make her more dependent, more manageable, while they systematically looted his legacy. The first rays of dawn, usually a source of comfort and renewal, found Arthur still at his desk, exhausted but resolute. The pain of betrayal was immense, but it was overshadowed by a fierce, protective rage. He would not let them destroy Eleanor, nor would he let them get away with their heinous crimes. He called his old friend, Judge Harrison, a man he had known since their college days, a man whose integrity was as unshakable as the mountains themselves. Harrison, now a respected district judge in a neighboring county, listened patiently, his voice growing graver with each detail Arthur recounted. "Arthur," Harrison said, his voice heavy with regret and concern, "this is a serious matter. A very serious matter. You need legal counsel, and you need to involve Adult Protective Services immediately. Do not confront them. Do not let them know you know." Arthur followed his advice to the letter. He met with Ms. Jenkins, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney renowned for her specialization in elder abuse cases. Her office, surprisingly warm despite her formidable reputation, became a sanctuary of strategy. Together, they meticulously built a case, gathering every shred of evidence. The meticulously documented bank records, the damning medical logs, Arthur's own detailed observations, now corroborated by hidden camera footage he had discreetly installed. The attorney advised him to continue his surveillance, to document everything, but crucially, to avoid any direct confrontation that might tip off David and Sarah and allow them to destroy evidence or flee. The emotional toll on Arthur was immense. He moved through the lodge like a ghost, feigning normalcy, engaging in polite, superficial conversations with his son and daughter-in-law, his heart a silent battlefield of grief, rage, and an unyielding resolve for justice. 4 weeks later, the trap was meticulously set. Arthur, under the guise of a celebratory dinner for the lodge's supposed record-breaking quarter, invited David and Sarah to a popular, upscale restaurant in downtown Willow Creek. As they sat across from him, their smiles seemingly genuine, their laughter echoing hollowly in his ears, Arthur felt a cold, steely resolve settle over him. He excused himself to the restroom, his hands trembling slightly, but his gaze unwavering. As he stepped away from the table, a team of plainclothes officers, accompanied by Ms. Jenkins and representatives from Adult Protective Services, entered the restaurant. The scene that followed was a blur of flashing badges, hushed, urgent conversations, and the stunned, then rapidly morphing into furious faces of David and Sarah as they were confronted with the overwhelming evidence. They were led away in handcuffs, their protests and denials falling on deaf ears, their carefully constructed facade crumbling in a public spectacle. The charges were severe and numerous: financial exploitation of an elder, aggravated assault for the medication tampering, a charge that carried significant weight due to Eleanor's fragile condition, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The ensuing legal battle was protracted and agonizingly painful, a public airing of private wounds that ripped open the very fabric of Arthur's family. Arthur testified, his voice steady, his testimony unwavering, even as David and Sarah's high-powered lawyers attempted to discredit him, to paint him as a confused old man, driven by paranoia and a failing memory. They tried to twist the narrative to portray Eleanor's decline as natural and the financial transactions as legitimate business dealings. But the evidence was irrefutable. The meticulous records, the offshore bank transfers, the altered medical logs, the hidden camera footage, they spoke a truth that transcended their desperate denials and their lawyers' clever rhetoric. In the end, justice, though slow and agonizingly hard one, prevailed. David and Sarah were convicted on all counts, sentenced to significant prison terms that reflected the gravity of their crimes. The lodge, once a cherished symbol of family, legacy, and Arthur's life's work, now carried the indelible weight of betrayal, its walls echoing with ghosts of what might have been. Arthur, unable to bear the memories it held, the constant reminder of his shattered trust, sold it. He and Eleanor moved to a small, sun-drenched cottage overlooking the Pacific Ocean on the coast of California, a place as far removed as possible from the shadowed peaks of Willow Creek and the painful memories they contained. In their new home, with consistent, loving care and the correct medication regimen, Eleanor slowly, miraculously, began to regain some of her former vitality. Her tremors lessened, her periods of agitation became less frequent, and while her memory remained fractured, there were moments of startling clarity, flashes of the vibrant, witty woman Arthur had loved for so long. She started painting again, her canvases filled with vibrant, abstract forms and bold colors, a testament to the enduring, resilient spirit within her, a spirit that had refused to be extinguished. Arthur, sitting on their porch, the salty breeze ruffling his hair, watching the endless rhythm of the waves crashing against the shore, often reflected on the bitter, profound lesson he had learned. Trust, he realized, was not a blind leap of faith, an unconditional surrender. It was a delicate balance, a constant negotiation between love and vigilance. He had loved his son, had trusted him implicitly, and that trust had been weaponized, twisted into a cruel instrument against the very person he sought most to protect. The scars of betrayal would always remain, a permanent reminder of the darkness that could lurk even in the most familiar faces within the closest bonds. But so too would the enduring strength of his love for Eleanor, a love that had weathered the most devastating storm and, against all odds, had found a new, if quieter, harbor of peace and renewed hope. The unraveling of Willow Creek had been a painful ordeal, but from its ashes, a new, stronger understanding of love and vigilance had emerged, a hard-won wisdom that would guide Arthur through the rest of his days. He had lost a son, but he had saved his wife, and in doing so, he had, in a profound and unexpected way, saved himself.